welcome you all. Today, we have our special guest, Dr. Sapna Bhatt, who is a PhD in speech and hearing with over 20 years of experience with adults and children with speech and language difficulties. She is a consultant speech and language pathologist working primarily with Copenhagen International School and various other international schools in Denmark. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking out time from your busy schedule.
Thank you for having me.
So our topic for today is speech and language development in children. While this topic may be captivating for all of us and it is near and dear to our heart, but some parents may feel anxious because of it. So let's dive in. Ma'am, can you tell us what do we actually mean by speech and language development?
So let's start with something broader. That's communication, how we communicate to each other. And then when we break it down into smaller bits and pieces, one aspect is speech. That means it could include pronunciation, like a child mispronouncing a word, like saying tar for car. It can also include fluency, like a child stuttering, like I want that car. It can be something with their voice, that the voice is not very clear, it's rough, they shout a lot, so you can feel the impact in their voice. Or the voice is too nasal, the sound is coming through the nose all the time. So that's what we mean by speech. What we mean by language is speaking and understanding of language around you. So are you using lengthy enough sentences? Do you have good vocabulary? Are you using sentences grammatically correctly? Are you able to understand all the directions and information that's given to you? And all of these have age appropriate norms. When we talk about speech, most of the speech clarity is done by 8 years. So a child should be clear by that age. But with language, there are multiple norms depending on what age the child is at. And then when we put it all together with nonverbal communication and tone of voice and body language, that's what becomes communication.
Ma'am, can we discuss a few of important milestones?
Yes, sure. So it's important to know that in the first year of life, children do not use a lot of spoken language. They could start with babbling, like making all kinds of noises and sounds, but they spend this one whole year listening to you. So it's a very important time of child's life. Make sure that your environment is language rich, that you're talking constantly, because that's where the input comes from.
Yeah.
By around 1 year, 11 months, it kind of coincides with first steps. You have your first words. And these can be any words, whatever child is fascinated. It can be an aeroplane, it can be a mom or a dad's name or a pet's name or a brother or sister's name. From 1 year onwards, there is, initially it's a little gradual that you would know all the words that your child has learned. But by the time you reach 2 years, your child should be speaking into word sentences. Like it could be ball, give. They don't have to be grammatically correct. But they should have an ever expanding vocabulary. So at 2, we say they should at least have 50 words. And then the growth is exponential. Then you're not able to keep track of the words. The sentences starting becoming longer and longer and longer. They start understanding more of what's happening around them. By around 5, they have very lengthy sentences, maybe 5-6 word sentences that they're talking. They understand most of the information, everyday questions and simple stories. In terms of the speech clarity, pronunciation, like how many sounds can they learn and all that. So they start with not knowing all the sounds. By around 3 years of age, they might know m, b, p, k, g, and that's enough for them to communicate, but they're learning other sounds. By the time they're 5 years old, they might not be able to say all the sounds clearly, but when you listen to them, you should be able to understand a child pretty well, like 90% of the time. After 8 is like a deadline for sounds. So when you are 8 years old, you should have acquired all the sounds, the r's and the s's and the sh's. You should be able to say all of that correctly, clearly in your utterances. So 8 is like a hard deadline for that. So that's in terms of speech. At any point, if a child is stuttering, then that is something you should get worried about. If it's a younger child, up to 3 or 4, it's okay because they're learning language. It might be a part of their language development. But if you see stuttering symptoms continue, a child is stuttering for a longer than 6 months at a time, then it's something you should, seek an expert opinion from a speech therapist. Language keeps developing for pretty much a long time. by around 15, 16, it kind of, you get most of the things that you need to have in your language. Vocabulary can develop all your age. There's no hard deadline for vocabulary. You can keep acquiring new words. Exactly. And then one important thing for language is because it's used to communicate. So you have to see if your child is finding social communication difficult, like how you interact with other people around you. Child might have a lot of language, but they're not using it to connect with people. That's also a red flag. You should be concerned about that, because that might tell you that something is going on terms of maybe autism or something to do with social communication.
Okay.
So those are mostly the important milestones.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, what are the causes of speech and language difficulties and disorders in children?
Multiple causes. One thing that comes straight away to your head is hearing. So if you have a hearing difficulty, usually children might be born with it, but they can also get infections. They have a nose infection, it goes to the ear because ear and nose are connected, and that can result in difficulties. Yeah. It can be that you have a hole in the lip or the mouth called cleft palate or cleft lip. That can affect language development. It can be anything to do with intellectual capacity, like the IQ is not where it should be. So the child is born with that way. They are not able to have enough intellectual skills for their age. We used to call it mental retardation earlier. We don't use that term anymore. We say intellectual disability. Anything to do with motor skills. So a child might be born with cerebral palsy and they have like a paralysis of certain body parts. It can also impact their mouth. It can be autism, which can also cause language difficulties, and most of the times they co-occur. Some of the children might just have pure language difficulty without anything being wrong. So that can also impact language.
So
and
it's
some
an umbrella
children
kind of a
can
thing.
have, yeah.
So it's an umbrella kind of a thing. So many things.
It's
Under
many,
one
many,
thing.
many things. That's why it's sometimes difficult to pinpoint what's happening. Like as a clinician, differential diagnosis is not always so easy.
Yeah.
Because multiple difficulties can show you similar symptoms. But pronunciation difficulties, usually, if they occur by themselves, they are just like a child hasn't had a good chance to learn. Most of the times, they are the easiest to take care of. You can easily remediate them with speech therapy. Other things might be that you are in it for a longer haul. So, like if your child has autism or a hearing difficulty, then it takes longer time to build in skills. But if it's a pronunciation difficulty, it might, without anything else going on, then it's much easier to remediate that.
Okay. When should a parent be really concerned? I think you have answered it already, few of the things. Would you like to add something to it?
Yes. So, like I said, if your child is not very clear by 5 and strangers and other people say, oh, we can't understand what the kid is saying, that's a red flag in terms of pronunciation. Stuttering at any point of time when a child stutters, and if it goes on for longer than 6 months, and you see a bit of a physical symptoms going on, a body stress or tension associated with stuttering, then that's something you should, seek help for. In terms of language, if your child is not speaking enough by 3 years, like you don't hear many sentences, the child doesn't have vocabulary of 50 or 100 words by 3 years, it's a big red flag. Although we say, there is this myth that they're late talkers, they'll catch up. But according to the research, what we see is that only 50% of kids who start speaking late catch up. So even if they are late speakers, it's still a good idea to seek some help, get some things that you can do as parents at home, or get intervention so your child can catch up. Because anything to do with speech and language has implications on reading and writing. So if you don't start early on to remediate that, then they'll find reading and writing difficult too. And then one big red flag is if your child is finding it difficult to hang out with kids. So, children who don't have much language instinctively start playing and interacting with other kids. Even if they use gestures and body language, they do that. It just comes to children very easily. But if your child is finding it hard to build connections with other children, and social situations are very distressing for them, then you have to really start worrying about it. And a general sign, you can also see speech and language difficulties with kids who have attention difficulties. And in those kids, you'll find that, giving them repeated directions, they're not able to follow them. or they're not able to do well in reading and writing if they are of that age. They are something we say they're very forgetful, they keep forgetting instructions and they keep forgetting this stuff. Those are also indications that something is going on with speech and language.
Hmm. Yeah, right. So there are many misconceptions about this speech and language development. So would you like to say something about it?
Yes. One is, pronunciation is not such a big deal. I know that I grew up with pronunciation difficulties, and
Oh,
I had people, yeah, I did. I had them for a short period of time, and I had this uncle who used to tease us a lot, and somehow he acted like a speech therapist for me, and I corrected
okay.
myself.
Uh,
But I also know that there were people who used to say, go to this temple or do this or
mhm,
do this, that'll remedy it. If there is a difficulty in speech and language, as parents you can do things, but you need to seek help. I can
mhm,
understand, thinking that, going to a temple might help. That's the faith part of it. I'm not saying anything about that. But if you don't do anything in terms of speech therapy, those difficulties will remain. So
mhm,
it is important to, if you as a parent are concerned and you see that, your child is not doing exactly as other kids that age, or you have, this is your second child and you see a mismatch between your first child's development and second child's development, then you have to be, you have to go and seek help. It doesn't hurt to see, is it age appropriate, is your child developing age appropriately. Another misconception is that, they're boys, they'll pick it up. Boys are a bit slower than girls in most of the language development, but they are not terribly delayed than girls. So to
yeah,
just,
that is the point that you just mentioned. I have seen with my kids also, between whatever my daughter used to say, and then at the same age, how and what my son used to talk.
yeah.
I could find a difference.
But it's not like you don't go out of the normal mile. You are
Yeah,
within a certain range.
yeah,
You don't go
yeah,
out of that. And girls develop socially much faster
yeah.
than boys. So then they also use their language much more. So that impacts. So again, if it's a boy and you're concerned, then you should go and seek help. If your child is a late talker at 2.5, you don't have enough words, you don't have 50 words, you don't have sentences, and someone tells you this child will pick up, it's, just, it's okay. Everybody, I have seen so many people who are like that. It doesn't matter. This child will outgrow it. Like I said, research says that 50% outgrow, 50% don't.
Don't.
In both cases, however, they have a bigger gap to fill in. So at 4, they have to catch up so much more than other kids. So it
Yeah.
is a stress on their system. So it's a good idea, even if you don't want to attend speech therapy regularly, get the child assessed and ask the speech therapist for a home training program to
Yeah.
train you as a parent, because you can be the best person doing all the things for this child, and have periodic consultations to see if your child is on track. So I
Yeah.
would say, as a parent, if you think your child is not doing, is not age appropriate in speech and language skills, then go and seek help. It's just that straightforward.
Yeah.
Stuttering does not resolve by itself. Pronunciation difficulties usually do not resolve by themselves, especially if it's more than 6-year-old child and still has pronunciation difficulties. For all of those issues, you need help.
Yeah. And what role do the early intervention programs and speech therapy and other things play in addressing the speech and language disorders?
So let me give you an example. So let's imagine we have a child who's 2 years old, and other children his age are talking in sentences, and this child is just using maybe 2 or 3 words or 10 words. Now, as this child goes through another year or two, they have to catch up to so much more that their peers have done. That means they have to do extra work. And then, if this child really has a speech and language problem, this child has put in a lot more effort. That that means there's a lot of stress on the child. They have a lot more of catching up to do. And as kids get older, they find it difficult. They become more aware of how different they are from other kids. So it impacts their self-confidence. That's why early intervention is super important, because the gap is lesser. The earlier you start, the lesser gap you have to fill in.
Yeah.
Child has to put in less effort. You have to put in less time, actually, especially with pronunciation disorders. If you start very early on, you quickly resolve them and it's done. But when you start later, You start in first grade, second grade, a child is 7, 8 years old. It's much more frustrating. And it has an impact on self-confidence because they're more aware of what's happening around them. So if you look at it, even financially, you are doing it for a shorter time. So it's taking you less effort, less money, less time. And the
Yeah.
child is catching up quickly. So it doesn't have an impact on self-esteem. The more you wait, the more impact it has on all of these different areas.
Yeah, and on child emotionally and socially also.
Yeah, and if you have a child who is pre-literate, like in kindergarten or pre-K, like that, the moment they get into first and second grade is where we see a lot of kids being identified in school. It's because they already have a very fragile speech and language development, and then you're putting a burden of reading and writing on that. So their
Hmm.
system is not able to take up this burden. It's too
Yeah.
much. They have to handle too many things. So not only do they continue to have difficulties in speech and language development, they then start finding reading and writing difficult too. So
Yeah.
if you have concerns about a child in a pre reading writing time, it's a good idea to seek help straight away so you can remediate whatever can be remediated before the child starts school and starts to have this extra burden of reading and writing.
Yeah. But what I could understand is that each case is different. It can be
Definitely.
anything and it can be nothing also. So you have to make sure what it is. Just take a consultation and just see, and then you can work on your child yourself also. That is
Yeah,
the
you can always ask, and it should be something you ask a speech therapist. If you
yeah,
don't want to attend a regular therapy, which is ideally, if something is identified, then that's the correct way to go about it.
yeah,
But for some instance, let's say in terms of time or financially it doesn't work for you, you can sit together with the speech therapist and say, can we have a home training plan for a month or two? Give
yeah,
us a few goals, show us how to do it, we'll do it at home, and then in 1 or 2 months we come back and we see, are we on track? And
yeah,
I've done it with many kids where parents say, oh, we are not up for regular speech therapy. Okay, then I give you goals, I train you. And parents are actually the best teachers
best,
because
yeah,
they're with the child so much more, and they know their child so well, and they can incorporate so many things into the daily routine. You can see much more progress than
yeah.
if they're
Even
not involved.
yeah, even I have observed that because when, as a physiotherapist, when the patients used to come to us, and many patients used to come from far off areas, they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't afford to come on a daily basis. So we used to make a tailored program for them, a home-based program, and educate the parents or any elders in the home so that they can. And you won't believe that they used to do it efficiently because it was not just a matter of an hour or a two, so that they have to sit with them and make them do. They used to do it on a maybe in small breaks and then do it consistently with their activities of daily living, so it makes more efficient and
Exactly.
fruitful for them.
So you're not like doing it in a clinic, in a
Yeah,
room, one on one. It's a more real life situation. So there is a
exactly.
higher possibility of generalization of those
Yeah,
skills there.
yeah, yeah,
So that's also a possibility. You just have to find the right person who's ready to guide you in that direction.
exactly, exactly.
But if your speech therapist says we think a weekly speech therapy is really needed or twice a week is really needed, then maybe for some time you should go do that. But I highly recommend that don't sit outside.
Mhm.
Ask the clinician, ask the speech therapist if you can join in, unless the child is highly distractible. Sometimes kids get very distracted by a
Yes,
parent's presence, but gradually they get used to it. So parents should know what's happening in the therapy session,
yeah,
and they should be able to learn strategies they can use at home. Otherwise it just takes a longer time, and it doesn't make sense that you don't know what your child is learning and how you can support them.
yeah, true, true. So what advice would you give to the parents who may be feeling overwhelmed or anxious about their child's speech?
There's one advice I'll give every parent who has kids. uh, Go by the guidelines. First foremost thing is screen time.
Yeah,
Ideally, your kids younger than 2 years should not have any screen time. I know, and I say ideally because I myself has given screen time to my kid. We all work and we get overwhelmed by that, but make sure you limit that. The problem with screen time is it's one-sided. It's not a two-sided interaction. So the child is just passively absorbing information. It's good sometimes. Kids learn a lot of things. I'm not completely opposed to screen time, but you have to be very aware of what's happening, what the child is watching, how long it's happening. Another impact screen time has on is screens are very captivating. They hold your attention really well because so much is happening. And compared to screens, real life is boring. So what happens is kids find it hard to pay attention outside of screen there. because they expect a lot of stuff to happen all the time, and it's not, so it's not fulfilling their ability to do that. Beyond 2 years, you can give more screen time, but you should know what your child is doing. You can make it interactive, you can talk about it. So that's about the screen time. And after 5, I know we all lose control, but you should still know what your child is watching, because it can have impact in multiple ways.
Yeah.
But they can also be, with some of the kids who are neurodivergent, like autistic children, they learn a lot from screens. So maybe as a parent, you have to figure out how to channelize that in the right direction. They might be very talented at coding and gaming, and they might absorb a lot of information from that mode. So you have to kind of figure out, how can I use screens effectively with my child? Second thing is books. Have them around you everywhere. Find out, go to the library, ask librarians age appropriate books, and keep reading as much as you can to children. That's the best way to build language. It's captivating. Children like it, especially at early ages. And it's good to have a child who reads, because there's lots of research which shows that it impacts language development. It impacts school results per se, the academic achievement. If your child is a reader, it really does help in that way. And do book reading together. Reading out loud is super good. We don't do it a lot these days, but reading out loud, children love it, but they also gain a lot out of it. It helps with your vocabulary development. In normal talking, we don't use very complicated vocabulary, so the only way to improve a child's vocabulary is through books. You can directly work on vocabulary. Other is have a language rich environment. That means, especially if you have younger children, keep describing things around to them. Keep talking to them about what they are doing, what you are doing. Play games that involve language. So this is generally tips for how to build language in children. But if you are concerned as a parent, and you feel something is not in place, and generally in my experience, if a parent feels like that, then there is something going on with their child. You as a parent can actually figure that out quite well. So
Yeah.
I would say seek help, seek professional help. People will give you all kinds of old wives tales, and oh, this happens, you grew up like that, see, you are doing quite well. Someone would say to me, oh, you grew up with the pronunciation thing, you're still doing well. But I have a cousin who grew up with that too, and she did not overcome it. She's my age, she still has pronunciation difficulties. So it was just by chance that I could do it, but she couldn't. But it impacts her well-being and self-esteem still. So unless she really attends speech therapy, she's not going to get over it. So if you feel concerned, go and seek help. It's not a big problem to go get an assessment and see what the speech therapist says in terms of, is there a gap, and if there is a gap, how much of a gap is there, and how you can help to set that right. So I would say do that. Seek professional help if you're really concerned.
Okay. So it was really a wonderful session with you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. I'm sure that this would be beneficial for many parents and guardians.
Thank you.
And if you know someone who needs to know this, do share this video with them. And thank you so much. And if you have any queries, questions, you can put them in the comment section. Ma'am, I would request you, if you see that.
I'll answer.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank
Put your
you.
questions in there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.